You're tuned in today with Andrew Gadomski. He's the founder of Aspen Analytics, professor at NYU, and one of the leading voices in workforce analytics and talent intelligence.
We got the one-click apply. We got the parsing is better than it used to be. And now people can apply to all these jobs. And now we're talking about creating friction again.
Every interview is costing the company money. Every application costs money to process. I think a lot of early stage recruiters are just really eager to please those hiring managers and demonstrate proficiency.
You're not satisfied with the qualifications, or you don't believe that these profiles align with what your thinking is. I would argue that your recruitment, your management, and your branding has failed you. It has failed.
Hey everybody, this episode of Building the Talent Machine is brought to you by our sponsor, WellFound. If you're a recruiter like me, you're probably always looking for a smarter, faster way to find startup-ready talent. Well, WellFound has you covered. It gives you instant access to a talent pool of 10 million plus startup-minded candidates from all around the globe. You can set up everything in just 10 minutes or less, from posting jobs to building your employer brand and managing applicants, with everything you need to kickstart your recruiting in one place. Need data? WellFound integrates seamlessly with your ATS and helps you stay organized without the chaos. And if you're ready to supercharge your sourcing, meet WellFound AI. Stop scrolling and start hiring. WellFound AI reviews hundreds of profiles each week. It reaches out using hyper-personalized templates, and when candidates respond, it manages the back and forth for you. All that's left is one click to approve, and your calendar fills up fast. So if you're ready to find, connect, and hire your team from pre-seed to IPO and build with the best startup talent out there, WellFound makes it happen. Check out wellfound.com and see how fast you can tap into the startup talent ecosystem. Now, let's go build a talent machine. What's up, everybody? You're tuned in today with Andrew Gadomski. He's the founder of Aspen Analytics, professor at NYU, and one of the leading voices in workforce analytics and talent intelligence. Andrew has helped shape some international standards on hiring metrics, advised Fortune 500s on data-driven HR, and now applies his expertise at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. He's here to show how data analytics and strategy are reshaping the future of work. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brandon. As always, I appreciate being on shows like this, but it's really exciting to be on yours and share with your audience and really kind of jam out on topics that candidly most podcasters and influencers and people who educate usually don't talk about. So thanks for that.
Yeah, Andrew, I just appreciate the kindness you've shown off LinkedIn comments and DMs, willingness to share freely some of your knowledge, expertise, and learnings. That's why we're doing this whole thing. Building the Talent Machine is about uplifting and upskilling the world of HR and recruitment, and it's advancing quickly, and your insights are invaluable.
Thank you so much. So what do you got for me today?
Yeah. Well, first off, I gave you your intro, but how do you explain what you do to people?
So, for the government, the last 6 years of my life was really around, Andrew, can you help us solve larger problems within Homeland Security? First, that started with analysis on the likelihood of actually being able to staff the southern border for Customs and Border Patrol. A lot of people don't know that. That was how I got started with DHS, Department of Homeland Security. And then there was an opportunity, hey, Andrew, can you help us build the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency? And that was when I joined that organization, there was 1,500 people and barely any contractors. Now the organization is, fourfold that. And what a great experience that was. That I did have when, I came in. I was first a contractor, then I became a federal employee, and then almost immediately I became a branch chief in an acting role, which is very common, and, had over 20 people in workforce planning and talent intelligence working with me, which is a very large team. And, but in order for me to do that, I had to get approval from the chief counsel and allow me to continue my business, Aspen Analytics, which I've had for almost 20 years. And I can't do for the government what you do for the private sector. That is a no-no. And so a few years ago, when I converted, I moved the business into analytics around auditing. And so what where companies need to understand around auditing and safety related to artificial intelligence, pay equity, wage transparency, and candidly, at this point now, cybersecurity. And that's the work that I'm doing now. And it's exciting to dive back into that. A lot of people don't know that, now I've made that, I've come back out of the government for a bit, and that's going to be my full-time gig again, because candidly, it's just too important. I mean, I think that there's an opportunity to educate and lead there. And one of the reasons I joined the department was about mission. And now I have another one. And so,
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that I've always been kind of mission focused, and there's some big stuff going on. So time to dig in.
I agree. This is actually where you and I first engaged. It's this idea of data security, candidate fraud. Let's unpack that. What is going on when we hear companies talk about candidate fraud and data security at the ATS application recruiting level?
So first of all, there's a lot of noise, right? So let's just realize that what's in the LinkedIn threads and what we hear is little snippets of what is actually going on. So what people don't understand around, say, cybersecurity and infrastructure security is, first of all, what it is. So, most people just get like that 45-minute training and they check the box and then they forget what all the different concepts are. But ultimately what we have now is we have people who are faking their intention to apply to a job or work for an organization or work with a staffing firm or work as in contingent labor as a contractor, and they have other intentions. And that has been amplified. That's always been there. And there's some really good examples of how organizations have been infiltrated using social engineering or insider threats. Social engineering is I'm faking who I am, or I'm rusing, and then you give me information and then I hack you. Well, insider threat is I've gone all the way in to work for you, or I've been influenced by a foreign adversary and now I'm helping them get information out. That's not new. It's not that is not September 3rd, 2025 stuff. I mean, that is always been around really for a while, and it's now taken us all of about 4 minutes to talk about artificial intelligence. But what has happened is two things. You can use those tools to replicate that activity. You can create your own create an algorithm, create your own bots, create your own repetition and workflows, and you can blast it to 10,000 individuals at once or more. You can continually do it. So what used to take a consortium or a group, and there's any number of labels of group, Salt Typhoon and so on, they would attack and they would come in. But now you can just have an individual go ahead and do this. And I think what they tend to do is execute ransomware. And so they're trying to get recruiters to give them enough information so when it can get in and put in some sort of something that's malicious. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is they usually know how much cybersecurity insurance you have. And so they stand you up for the money that your insurance company will pay for. So a lot of this isn't new. My philosophy is this idea of zero trust. So let's just assume that everybody who's applying to your job is either malicious or disingenuous. And it's not that they don't want to work for you potentially, but you go on LinkedIn or you can see that 462 people have applied for the job. Well, okay, and they probably hit 200 jobs. Okay, they certainly don't. They're certainly interested in your position, but the chances of them actually working for you is actually really small. So it's fair to say that they hit the job because it was open, not necessarily your brand. And so I've labeled that as disingenuous. And you have disingenuous and then you have malicious. And that means zero trust. That means your ATSs have to be secure by design and your processes need to be secure by design. And if you're not having a conversation, I don't care if you're a startup, if you're a Fortune 10, we need to just assume that all the systems that we have some sort of set of safety mechanisms that say, hey, this doesn't pass a sniff test, or something's, we've got a threat here. And then the last is this idea of 100% transparency, where people are going to use artificial intelligence. Let's just assume that you're going to be using AI at some point. You might as well tell everybody who's applying to the job that you're using AI, or that you're going to be transparent about wages, but you're also going to be transparent about the security measures that your teams are taking to protect the employees that already work there and to protect the interests of the applicants. There's this concept that everyone's fraudulent. People need to recognize that an applicant tracking system, a CRM system, could be hacked for the people you're never going to hire.
Yes.
And there are millions of people who will never work for you, and their data is actually a little more important in theory than the people who do, because still have emails. And some of the rusing is, hey, we knew that you applied to a job a while ago, so we have another one. Did you want to apply? People don't read the link. They click the link and it releases some malicious type of code. I don't think that this is new stuff. I just don't. Well, the amplification is just tremendous.
One of the things I'm seeing in the applicant tracking sister vendor ecosystem is the real-time enrichment of applicant data within the ATS. So when you think about the database having a resume or an application submission, now ATS companies are leveraging third-party data enrichment providers. So in real time, that data is then by default more vulnerable because it is more accurate, it's more up to date. If somebody applied to a job 5 years ago with brandon.jeffs@gmail, but they changed their email, well, now you've got a better chance of reaching me and executing some sort of malicious act. Is that fair to say?
I think that's a very smart way of approaching it and seeing that that's a vulnerability, right? That people could go ahead and fake a profile from several years ago and then have a long play. And I think that that's fair, and that's certainly within the portfolio that may exist. I think where we are right now is, because it's early in the ecosystem with the automated updating, I think that we're probably going to see different security measures that will be applied by the ecosystem of HR technology providers. And they'll use that as a feature and benefit and say, look, we got you. Now, we're going to make sure that as we do updates, that we're doing things securely. And that's part of that secure by design and 100% transparency. You've got to ask those leaders, what's on your roadmap to protect my interests? As 850 people are applying to this job and one of them is going to get it. So I've got 849 legitimate profiles, and some of them might be malicious.
When I think about the applicant tracking system market, currently is estimated at around 2.5 billion market cap in 2024, 2025. There's estimates on the conservative end that it's going to triple. When we think about the problems recruiters have faced, we have asked the applicant tracking system to make it easier for applicants to apply because it's been a candidate's market. So these problems are now of our own making, but we're seeing market diversification across the vendor ecosystem. I'm not a technologist, but I know how easy it is to spin up an ATS. You could throw a marketing website over that and sell whatever you want. So I think these questions we are asking of our vendors and that accountability on the vendor side is paramount with these conservative and even more aggressive projections for where the market could go. So how do you think about vendor accountability when it comes to ensuring data security if you're buying new software?
I mean, I think that there are standards that you can lean on, right? So 27001, and there's a series within, the 27 certification series at ISO. I think that talking with the information security officer at your own organization and talking about what the vulnerabilities are, because they may not be aware. Obviously, they're very concerned about their customer data. If they're a healthcare provider, they're concerned about patient data, but they may not have on their list of top priorities, oh, by the way, we also have vulnerabilities associated with our applicant pool. So I think it's actually pretty important for the ecosystem to address this. And I do think that, yes, you can spin up an ATS. Yes, you can fake something. But ultimately, I think where we're going to see is, to your point, we asked for one-click apply. I remember back in, 2013, we pulled together the Candidate Experience Awards, and I worked with Jerry Crispin and Joe Murphy, and we came up with the survey. And then, it was like, what are we going to do about it? And here we are, and it's, 13 years later or 12 years later, and we got what we wanted. We got the one-click apply. We got the parsing is better than it used to be. And now people can apply to all these jobs. And now we're talking about creating friction again.
Yes.
To, reduce the malicious, reduce the disingenuous, candidly avoid burnout. And I think one of the things I've told organizations is you got to shut the water off. You're letting 300 people apply to a job. Okay, if 65 people apply to a job and you at least pause the application process, and of the 65 people who apply, you're not satisfied with the qualifications, or you don't believe that these profiles align with what your thinking is, I would argue that your recruitment, your management, and your branding has failed you. It has failed.
I think you're missing a zero. I think it's right now, companies are seeing 3,000 applicants being permitted to apply and recruiters screening through 650 potential candidates, because an applicant is different than a candidate.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yes, and there are organizations who are doing that, and there are any number of countries who have experienced the cultural nuance that the more that you apply, the more that you're creating effort, and it's completely acceptable. But what's not acceptable is the assumption that the more candidates I get, the better it is. What should happen is, and I did a great part of my capstone and thesis for my graduate degree, is what happens within the first 7 days of the application. And if you don't identify a handful of candidates within the first 7 days, you deliberately extend at least by 17 days the job in terms of the offer, at least by 17. So I would offer up, shut the water off and pause. Your compensation might be off. Your facility engagement, whether it's hybrid or remote, maybe that's impacting. Maybe because you weren't transparent enough. You could have widened the job too much. These ranges of we'll pay you between $119,000 and $219,000. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. If you're doing that, audience, I appreciate the transparency of what you're capable of doing, but that's widened your candidate pool so much that you might actually be creating a dialogue you don't want. And, many of the providers have the ability to shut people might say, well, I don't want a posting that's at a third party and people come and the job is no longer there. I appreciate that. But if you're transparent with your process and it says so, look, in the government, it's 100 applicants or 10 days, whichever occurs first. And then we shut it off.
Interesting.
Because now you don't have to do it that way, but that's legitimately manageable. And okay, if you don't have the 100, but you only have 60, then argue with me that you can't look at 60 applicants and really review them. You can certainly review applicants over a series of not minutes, but whatever documentation they've given, give it as due consideration. And okay, then you can narrow from there and have your wish list of who you want to respond and those types of things. But, this whole 300, 3,000 concept, yes, we created it and we are doing nothing about it.
One thing you mentioned a couple weeks ago is a fascinating idea that ties into what you just shared around pass-through rates. So if you're reducing the top of funnel by that magnitude, I talk to recruiters, sometimes they have a hiring manager that wants to interview 15, 20 candidates. I talked to a recruiter in a startup the other day that had 30 engineering manager candidates go through a hiring manager without moving them forward. That's crazy. That's a wild inefficiency of operating expense. The challenge I see, particularly in early stage companies, is we get these first time hiring managers or inexperienced hiring managers dictating to recruiting what they want to see. I subscribe to your theory that it's vice versa. Recruiting advisors, we need to inform our hiring managers of what they need based on the data we have in the market, based on the data we have about internal performance from our HRBP counterparts. Can you share a little bit more of that insight? I forget where I saw you post it, but it was that idea exactly, that it's ludicrous that we allow hiring managers, particularly first timers, to dictate to recruiters what they want to see.
So there's a diplomatic way of having that dialogue, which is maybe it's top-down strategy, maybe it's direct one-to-one, and it says, I hear you, manager, but let me tell you about my experiences of what works and what will be more efficient for you. And I appreciate your desires, but we don't have the bandwidth to operate that way for your type of position. We might be able to operate that way on other positions that are super critical or are very unusual. Okay, that's the diplomatic way of saying it. The New Jersey way of saying it is pound sand. It is. You just be bold enough to say that process here creates problems for our effectiveness and reduces our earnings. And so if you would like to have 30 applicants, then I would advise talent leadership to say, hiring managers probably have access to their own applicant tracking, to the applicant tracking system. There's nothing that says a manager can't take on their own process and do what they need to do. And maybe at some point a recruiter is brought in as a talent advisor, a subject matter expert. And, I've had managers who I've worked with, whether it's directly when I was in executive recruitment, when I was in corporate recruitment, say, hey, send me everything. Great. And it says, and then it was, well, Andrew, can you print out the resumes and put them on my desk? And it was, no, do me the favor, log in. And if you want the day, because what will happen is the days or the week of the interview, you're going to have a packet at your disposal that's been FedExed to you. And then this way we know that you're taking notes and those types of things. And it's a good candidate experience for people to know that you're engaged by having a copy of the resume there, seeing that you have questions. And they're like, well, that seems excessive. I'm like, it's not about you. It's about the people you're interviewing. So pound sand, hashtag it and get going with it.
Reminds me of this phrase that a lot of young recruiters adopt. It's white glove service. I don't know where this thing came from. And it's just like, that's not how we as recruiting as a function has a data-driven outcome and influence on the business, because every interview is costing the company money. Every application costs money to process. I think a lot of early stage recruiters are just really eager to please those hiring managers and demonstrate proficiency.
And I think that realize that the demonstration of proficiency is respecting their time and say, my position here is to have you do the most productive work that I can, because the vast majority of the people who are going to come through this system are never going to work here. And it may not be because they're not qualified. It's simply because they may not like what we have to offer. We've taken a 2-page document of a position description, and we've used it to explain a multi-billion or multi-million dollar organization with mission and goals and performance. Okay, you're never going to get it done with a 2-page document anyway. So a lot of them are going to realize that the job isn't what they want. So rather than going down that path, let's go down the path of, after I get a handful of folks that I think are good, or you see a handful of folks that meet the qualifications, let's go through those processes. And if that means that at the end, people have said no to us, we did a good job, because we've done the things that we need to do, which is assess talent and then have a partnership with that talent. And, I remember people say, well, what's our offer decline rate? And I'm like, well, that's kind of like how many of your flights are delayed. I appreciate the inconvenience. And I know that that's hurts and it impacts other things. But I think the most important thing is probably taking off and landing safely. So let's kind of just get grounded on this idea that the most important thing here is to end up with a hire that you believe is beneficial. What has happened along the way may have some inconveniences for you as a manager, but my job is to make sure that the productivity after they're here was set up for success.
Andrew, you speak like a recruiter. You also speak like a manager. You just jumped into talk tracks. So tell me, have you led teams? Have you had direct reports? What does it look like to build your own recruiting machine with great recruiters who are eager to borrow the knowledge you just shared with us so freely?
I think the first thing is it's okay to so when I've had recruiters working for me, when I've had researchers working for me, which has now become the phrase of talent intelligence, I had outsourced offshore talent intelligence back in 2000, 2001. I mean, that's a long time ago. And people are like, how do you do that? And it was, okay, do all the open source intelligence and, confirm that these are real people, because, if you can't get it, someone has to dial, someone has to do the email and make sure that they're there. Somebody has to do my favorite one is you would have someone get a hold of a phone number and they would call like at 7 a.m. local time and see if they could get through the voicemail system to see if that actually was the person, right? People were like, Andrew, that sounds so old school. I'm like, I don't care how old school things are in terms of who reported to me or the methodology. What I cared about is how many discussions did you have today?
Yeah.
And tell me about those discussions. And that's how I've always hired people who work for me when I was running recruitment at Honeywell. That's how I looked at, the RPOs that I analyzed for the Fortune 500 and say, what are they doing? What are the actual knowledge, skills, abilities, and tasks? And let's make sure that it's being effective. And so I've had researchers working for me, recruiters working for me, recruiting managers working for me. And here's a great example. I'm walking through, this is when I'm a consultant running my business. I'm walking in San Francisco through large organization, okay, remain nameless. And I've always remain nameless because typically if someone's come to me in our team, they already have a problem that they can't solve.
Yes.
Right. We're 100% referral oriented. I'm walking through and there's 100 recruiters between 2 floors. And I go through 2 floors and I talk to the head of talent acquisition. And, they were, what are your initial concerns as you walked around and talked with people and you did your go and see, because I flew out there. And I said, your floors are quiet. And they're like, what does that mean? I said, how is it possible that over dozens of recruiters who are in front of a computer, they're not talking to anyone about the value of your organization? And their response was, well, they're using other tools like, we've got texting and SMS and we've got, we've got the phones and all those things. I'm like, well, let me ask you this. Did you get your mortgage without talking to anybody? No. Did you buy your vehicle consistently without talking to anybody? No. How about your spouse or your child? Have you had serious conversations with them through text and email? Well, sometimes, but usually not. So how do you justify that someone who's going to go ahead and move their family, move their job, make an investment of 40 to 60 hours a week, how are you doing that without dialogue? And it's, well, we're using these methods. I said, I appreciate that. But what closes candidates, either to say yes or no, is a genuine message. And genuine messages come in many forms. And even if you are using an interpreter in American Sign Language, you sense that emotion by actually seeing the person communicate with you, because you see the eye contact, you see the facial expression. Now, that can be replicated with your voice. And so I'm a big fan of, don't try to, now in some cases, there are plenty of jobs that may not require the voice, may not require the qualifications because they're in such demand. You're begging someone to come on board. And I think the registered nurse, the radiology technician, the mechanic, I mean, I have done some of let me tell you something. Until you've done a nuclear regulatory affairs manager, or you have done RPO for mechanics across the country, or registered nurses, or CNC machinists, if you think that's all about banging on LinkedIn, you are sorely mistaken.
I'm so with you.
And if you want to get a hold of a mechanic and get them to move a few blocks away, they're going to ask the question, what are you going to do for me? It's the Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? And that's how you close. And that's how you qualify. At least that's my perspective.
Maybe that's the East Coaster in me, Andrew, that I appreciate the candidates in like blue collar work, hiring non-desk workers, hiring folks that don't have a LinkedIn profile, who haven't perhaps gone to an elite university. They're the fabric of our society. I've had those jobs. I also appreciate it against the lens of candidate experience. Candidates owe recruiters nothing. You have to earn your response rate. And each metric, each response is a human on the other side. And our devices today are still phone-based. This is still the most effective tool in the toolkit if you're a recruiter. But I think because so many recruiters and folks that are in the recruiting industry came into recruiting during a bull market, they don't know what it's like to have to pound the phone, to have to work a really hard search, to find somebody that doesn't have a digital profile. And that's why I think the direction of recruiting is no longer a young person's game. It's going to be those seasoned individuals who know how to source, who can fill a pipeline, who do care about the candidate experience at that one-to-one level.
Yeah. And I think that there's too much investment in some cases, not enough. So it's going to be difficult to have service level agreements within your organization. They're going to have to be a little bit wider. I think the trades and the no digital footprint is on the rise. I think executive search is going to drastically change, where you're going to have people in agencies. These are RPOs, and the most skilled people maybe in a corporation are people who are talking to the no digital footprint, the analog profile.
Yes.
And that is some hard stuff. Let me tell you something. If you so we've gotten so far away from this that most individuals, especially in recruiting, don't own a business card. Okay. Well, I'm aging myself, but going to a competitor's or a Target's parking lot, taking your business card and writing on the back, would you like to know if our organization could be better than yours? And have a phone number and put it underneath with your business, on the back of your business card, and just putting it on the windshield or on the window. Like, Andrew, you're crazy. I'm like, nope, I crazy close.
Dude, you literally just described my experience as an early recruiter. I was hiring grocery workers across the country, and I was working with an organic grocery store. We would go into food deserts, and we had to hire stockers. We had to hire managers. So what would I do? Like, I was out there for a week pounding the pavement, and I would do that exactly. I would go in if there was a Whole Foods, talk to the folks cleaning produce, just see what's going down. But I would do that exactly. And I remember a store manager came to one of my job fairs with the flyer that I had, peppered all the windshields with. And they tried to run me out of Fredericksburg, Texas. And so you can imagine a Yankee like me with these good old boys down in Texas. It was funny, man. But I think that experience, that level of accountability, I don't know. I'm a little bit of a hustle bro, but I think about my life at that time. Like, the only reason I did that is because I was motivated to have a job. I was hired to do something. I needed to pay my bills. And I loved that idea of guerrilla marketing, recruiting, and connecting with people. I just don't know how the craft gets passed along.
Well, so I'll give you an example of what talent pipelining really is.
Let's do it.
So organization says we're really having trouble getting strong financial knowledge workers who can probably end up being our comptrollers or controllers, working as senior level budget analysts. We just can't seem to get them to come to us. And there's any number of organizations now. I mean, I'm looking at a Hewlett Packard computer, and that's a consumer brand. They have a different angle to the market. And so this was a non-consumer brand. And they're like, we don't know how to get a hold of people. And so worked with some technology, some RPO organizations. And the idea was to just get people to have a cup of coffee with a senior leader and say, look, they don't have a job for you today, but they're going to probably have jobs for you for your career.
Yes.
What's wrong with having a cup of coffee with a controller and just talking with them? And they might even become a mentor to you. And the measure was how many cups of coffee were served a week. And that was it. We had advocates or ambassadors, and that was a way to get them. Another good story was you have people were trying to, an organization was trying to get people to serve food or do the prep of food for the airlines. And they couldn't they were really struggling getting people there. And what they realized is the people who were there, the data analytics showed that there was a high percentage of them that were using public transportation to get to work. Well, guess where the branding dollars went? To papering and putting billboards and ads at the bus stations and at the train stations and doing like the whole inside of a train saying, you're already on your way to the airport. Do you want to do something different? And
this is actually the role of Tech Swag.
That's the good stuff.
Tech Swag is not about telling the world how like great your B2B SaaS is. Like Tech Swag, this idea of like a Google backpack is for the hundreds of Google employees that are commuting to work with their nice luxury apparel and consumer goods to market to other people to come work with them. Like everybody knows what Google is. We don't need to go buy Google products. So that's the way I think about folks when they're, all decorated in their Tech Swag is, to me, that's all just recruitment marketing budget to try to get great folks to work for you.
If you look at some of the HR technology providers that advertise, if you think about people who play sport, and the one that sticks out the most, and I'm a golfer, is actually within golf. The fact that Workday or Paradox actually have ambassadors or SAP success factors where you see their name on there. You don't think the CEO or chief folks who have budget control, you think they're not watching golf on the weekends? Well, not everybody is, but you'd be surprised what those demographics are. And then it makes you feel good about the $25 million you spent on a HCM over a period of time. And that goes back to what you're talking about, which is reinforcing the brand based on where it is.
Yes.
And it's okay to give people the swag, and it's okay to say, hey, when you're on the train, when you're around, be proud. Be proud of your employment brand and, wear it with the right kind of pride. And if you don't feel prideful, if you feel like you don't want to advocate, let's close the door for a minute and tell me why you're struggling with advocating your team, your management. Let's keep it quiet. And it could just be something simple like, my work is not my life. My family or my religion or other things are more important to me than advocating my work. And man, is that honest. And the best part about the honesty was the actual ask. There's this, we have to have engaging employees everywhere. I'm like, no, you probably need to have productive employees everywhere, but they're not going to necessarily sell you after they get out of the parking lot or after they get off the train. They've got all kinds of priorities that have really nothing to do with where they work.
Let's go back to something you shared, which is the idea of attracting talent and filling roles in the trades. I historically think about college degrees as like an on-ramp to the middle class. The middle class is shrinking. What do you think the role of higher education is these days, particularly for young folks entering the job market in a time like this?
I think that there's, first of all, when you think about going all the way back through grammar school, high school, or if you even are going into undergraduate, some of the patterns that you pick up as, in your youth is this idea of responsibility, repetition, social dynamics. And so I think that, undergraduate degrees certainly can offer an extension to that. In some cases, maybe more if they're in person, or at least if they're virtual and in cohorts. So I think that there's an important part of education that really has nothing to do with the subject matter itself. Okay. So I think this idea that education may go away, well, certainly there might be disciplines that would reduce in student enrollment. But, let's just realize that part of education is around maturity and those social dynamics. I think that when it comes to undergraduates, as an example, really struggling to find a position, especially those in the sciences, there was a generational bill of goods that got sold, right? If I go to school to become and go into computer science, I'm on my way to being successful. And I think that's obviously changed. I think the role of education maintains in the trades, but I'm going to extend it to the idea, and I'm going to credit Ben Eubanks, who was a previous guest of yours. He didn't say this on his pod, but I remember he said this in some statement, that there's this idea of sitting and standing in terms of jobs. And I think anytime that you're using your hands, or you're being more tactile, or you have to have a certain level of mobility, I think there's certainly education there. There's no question. My daughter has asked me, hey, I want to go into pediatrics. I want to work with kids. What do you think the right thing for me to think about is? I said, you need to probably go into surgery, kiddo. Well, why? Because insurance companies aren't ready to pay for the robots to do the surgery on a 4-year-old. That's going to take some time. She got it. She knows that it's a business. And okay, does that mean that, there are other jobs in healthcare that are probably going to go away? And there was education associated with that. So the education will start to cease, but it may only cease in urban areas. You might need those individuals with those specific trades in more rural areas, or areas where volunteerism is higher. And so I think the amount of enrollments will be changing per discipline. But then again, I tell her, when in doubt, kiddo, go to A school and become a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. I guarantee you people will still have boats, and They will still make mistakes, or there will be weather incidents, and someone's going to have to go in the water and get them. So some jobs are just not going to go away.
I think we over index on ensuring that we have this happy, cozy experience. Work is hard. Life is hard. I have a lot of empathy. I've gone through experiences. Some people have far more adversity to overcome on a daily basis than I. So I don't want to sound like a complete jerk, but I always think back to what did the generations before us have to do to earn a living? And when we have these market dynamics, it's not always going to be up and to the right. I've moved across the country for different jobs. I'm from the East Coast. I'm in Colorado. I know not everybody can move, but that's one of the biggest pieces of advice. Young people can get to a city, get to where there are a lot of opportunities, take on these risks. But at the end of the day, I think back, I'm sure your grandfathers, your uncles, they were drafted to fight a war. And we're over here scrolling LinkedIn wondering if 22-year-olds are happy and cozy making $100,000 as a CSM from their remote luxury apartment. What are we actually talking about here? You know what I mean?
I think that there is, if people ask about their history in their family, they will learn more about the economy that they live in and how it was built. So my paternal grandfather owned a jewelry store. My wife's was a watchmaker. And interesting, fascinating story. The only reason he survived the Holocaust was because they knew he was in a trade. They knew that he knew how to fix watches, and they kept him alive so he could repair the SS officers' watches that were stolen. So if you want to talk about understanding the value of work, you've got to ask questions about what's been valuable over time.
Mhm.
My grandfather on my father's side was a furrier and a painter, and my grandmother went door to door selling greeting cards. And it's like, okay, there's work that provides money, provides respect, and it might be things that you never thought of. And find the thing that attracts you and realize that what attracts you in your 20s might be very different than what attracts you in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. And, you can have multiple careers, and you might be able to have multiple careers in one company. You tell an organization that you want to come in and start in finance, but maybe, at some point you say to them, I want to learn more about, our infrastructure, and maybe I can learn on assembly and become part of a frontline supervisor type of job. And, company might say, hey, we've got a program for you where, you know what, that's really interesting. We have trouble finding those folks. And if you ask about your history and you ask about your neighbor's history or your educator's history, you're going to learn a lot more about the economics and how work was and what it could be for you. And it's not, I've got my cool apartment in Soho and I've got to earn a couple $100,000 out of school in order for me to be successful. That measure of success isn't the same measure that was the golden generation.
And I talk to recruiters, a lot of the folks that have that ability to influence human behavior on the candidate side that you mentioned earlier in the conversation, they've had a lot of life experiences. They've talked to a lot of different types of people. They've recruited many different roles across different sectors of the S&P. That diversity of experience, I think, just makes recruiting more fulfilling because this is a grind. This is not a sexy profession. We get told no a lot. We get treated poorly internally a lot. But if you can find fulfillment in those 4 or 6 hours a day that you're talking to other people, pick up the phone and connect with a human, to me, it's such a beautiful way to make a living.
It's fantastic. One of the reasons I think that general practitioners, podiatrists, dermatologists in healthcare, I think one of the things they enjoy the most about their 5 to 25 appointments a day is that human connection. Can you imagine going to a physician's office and not talking at all or not communicating at all? What's your level of confidence about your care? And now here we are as recruiters. We have the ability to ask to willing people what's important to you in terms of your career and really listen in and hone in on that. I remember going to University of Virginia and talking to graduate students and saying, let's really talk about the balance here. And it's not just about work life. It's all these things that you may not consider over time. You may have aging parents at one point. What is your job all of a sudden changes how you support them, and maybe you'll have children one day. Maybe you'll decide to work in a rural area and you may not have access to as many things as you had. And so it's okay for recruiters. I think it's a really good idea for a technology recruiter to maybe deliberately ask their organization, what's not in tech in here? How can I represent our brand, but maybe do something else? And maybe it's facility management, it's real estate management, it's physical security, it's something else. And people say, well, I want to go ahead and get the cybersecurity folks or the tech folks. I get it. This what you know. Well, actually, what you know is how to talk to people, how to qualify them, and how to work with hiring managers on helping them facilitate decisions. Because guess what? Recruiters don't do hiring. They do a lot of things. But if you ask a recruiter how many hires they did in a year, they give you a number, and then you ask them how many people report to them, and then they say 0. And I'll say, you helped other people facilitate decisions. And that's an important job. But do that in a multitude of functions, because that's your expertise.
100%. I'll never forget, I was working for a startup in a highly regulated industry, and the CHRO tossed me a general counsel search. And that was the first legal hire I ever made. I wound up building a legal and compliance department from scratch. And they were like the most fun candidates to talk to. I just had a blast talking to a bunch of lawyers. They were on time.
Right.
They were efficient. They were good communicators. I learned so much about this like really boring area of our world that most people don't think about. And here's this niche group of folks that are just obsessed with it. It's so fascinating to hear and learn what lights other people up. One thing I want to ask, Andrew, is what are you seeing in the market today? You talked a little bit about talent intelligence. What's going on with the labor market? Talent mapping. Do we have enough humans to do the jobs of the future? There's a lot of alarmist headlines. What is your research and analysis as we stand today?
So one of the benefits that we have around technology and trades, not necessarily together but separate, is trades you could go ahead and execute earlier in the age, and you can also people can stay longer in the workforce, one for potentially financial reasons, but also we have antibiotics, we have treatment for diabetes, and we can have healthy lifestyles that allow people to where all of a sudden the workforce was maybe 22, 60, can be 16 to 70. And so I think that sometimes you're right with the concept of alarmist. We're not going to have the people. It's like, well, we have the people now. We just don't have the insight, right? We don't have the drive to make some of those changes. And I do believe that there is a hype cycle of AI is going to create all types of jobs. Well, I think if it's going to create anything, it'll create some trades and infrastructure jobs where, okay, we don't have the data farms. We don't have the electrical. We'll have to think differently about fossil fuel technology the reason why people have asked me, Andrew, what do you think artificial intelligence is going to do? I said, we're going to have multiple types of artificial intelligence because guess what? It's going to go to where the fuel is. Brazil, UAE, China, Russia, they're going to have their own artificial intelligence because guess what? They can fuel that locally. And if the United States wants to fuel it locally, and this is very controversial, I'll say it again, is y'all better figure out how to do better with coal. Because we got plenty of that. But I think that there's infrastructure jobs that are on the way up. And so I'm actually I think that my analysis of this is we're thinking about it wrong. We're trying to take what we've done in the last 10 to 15 years that has deemed us successful and say, well, we're not going to be successful doing what we've done for the last 10 years. Well, of course not. We've added an exponent or we've added a variable that we've never had in the equation. So let's work the math and think a little differently about, well, we're going to have more trades. Why? Because our bridges are failing. Our dams are failing. We're having more weather incidents. Our marine shipping fleets are older. Okay, where's the pride in I'm going to work in steel. I'm going to be a pipe fitter. And then where's the okay by the 50-year-olds that say, neighbors, parents, aunts and uncles, I encourage you to stay healthy and work into your 70s and enjoy your life. This idea of retirement at 65 is a very old concept. And we've always said people live a long time, but let's be smart about our workforce and realize I don't think we're going to be short. I think our thinking is short.
You talked about the hype cycle. And I think about, when I hear hype cycle, I think of, the Gartner hype cycle. And, we're almost 3 years into ChatGPT, consumer level LLMs at our fingertips, change the world. I think a lot of folks are feeling disenfranchised right now where it's like, dang, we're not living in the future. I thought AI was going to make science fiction a little bit more of a reality. And here we are almost 3 years in, and it's still kind of just doing like the diet version of all these cool whiteboard theses that we had years ago. So I thought we were in like the trough of disillusionment, headed towards the slope of enlightenment, maybe 6 to 12 months ago. But I would actually say now, I think we're going back towards the peak of inflated expectations. I don't think we've seen enough, particularly at the recruiting workflow level, to be this excited about AI. What are your thoughts?
I think you're right. And I would reference everybody who's listening should go look up Kurt Vonnegut and his practices and theories around, I believe it's the 5 plots of a good novel. And this is where the hype cycle came from. So Gardner, appreciate you you rip this off. Okay. And they ripped off what's known as the man in the hole. And it's the classic story of you start somewhere, there's this, someone's, starts their pathing, and then there's a dramatic event, and then they come back and then they go to the plateau that's less than the initial hype, right? And so it goes like this, not like that. And I think that sometimes we believe in what would be known as, say, the Cinderella story, which is happily ever after and ever more increasing exponentially. And I think that was the bill of goods got sold with AI, is that this will be forevermore, every Disney character ever where there's a happy ending. And that's just not the reality. What we've got multiple plot lines. And what we need to figure out is which one we're buying and which one can we really do. And I think that I do think that we're in the disillusionment for some. I think that we're in the enlightenment phase for others. And I think what you're talking about is there are places where we've plateaued. We have plateaued on okay, I'm going to use some assessment and I'm going to make better hires. I got no data to prove it. I've got candidates who are disenfranchised. And you might have people who say, well, we have less recruiters or we're enabling our hiring managers. I don't doubt that efficiency. I don't doubt that may land well with leadership. But okay, I think we're plateauing there. And the reason we're plateauing is because people are staying with their jobs longer. If you stay with there's this whole concept of recruiters will go away. Recruiters go away when the demand of jobs go down, period. AI will go ahead and remove all recruiters. You know what could remove recruiters? Hiring managers just doing it themselves.
And that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. There's going to have to be a human in the loop for probably my estimate. Maybe you can be my barometer here. I think there's going to be some sort of human in the loop for recruiting the way we know it and define it today for the next 5 to 7, 8, 10 years, because there's so many different types of hiring. So if you're that recruiter, yeah, maybe B2B SaaS VC tech startup recruiting, my kind of world, will dry up and hiring managers will have their press play button and they'll get candidates that are good enough for the offer to make the hire. Yeah. Well, recruiters in that world, we'll just go do something else. And I think there should be some curiosity and respect. And there's probably some stigma too. If you work at sexy tech company, that's something to hang your hat on. But it's right. Like you mentioned, you don't logo slap your website and you work with some of the best companies in the world because of that level of respect, not only for your client, but for yourself. And there's a level of humility there that I want to call out directly. And there's a second thing that I want to say, Andrew, about what you mentioned around that employee that is not the advocate for the brand and they come into the office. So if we're talking about these AI assessments to give us better hires, well, what is that data training an LLM rooted in? Trust. We've all had that experience where a top performer comes into our office and resigns. We are trusting that the employee is giving us the one true answer, which is also very hard to peg down a major life decision to resign from your job and to take another job. How do we know that there's one true truth being spoken to in that moment to the hiring manager? And then two, how do we know that hiring manager is documenting in their HRIS software process the way the intake form has been structured so that the LLM can be trained, so that the recruiters can reverse engineer the hiring process to mitigate regrettable attrition? This whole exercise to me is just vaporware. What are your thoughts on this delusion that we can reverse engineer post-hire outcomes through LLMs into the recruiting process?
So the first thing is there's a myth about we have the best talent. And I think the first thing is you have no data on the people who you decided not to hire. You probably interviewed more than one person. You made a series of decisions and then you made a consensus and you made the leap that Brandon is going to be a better performer than Andrew for this role. Well, pretty sure you don't have any data on Andrew, who doesn't work for you, a year later. So this idea that we made the best and we have the best talent, I think it's like saying you have the best vehicle, or I think it is a self-reflective, we've made a good decision statement. So training the large language models to use your own talent and how you've advanced people carries a level of proxy and subjectiveness. And that's okay, I think, as long as we admit it. And I don't believe that we're going to be away from using those tools to maybe make sure that people have, or that they are they're genuine, that they may have any number of skills that maybe we as recruiters or managers would normally execute bias against, right? A 2-page resume is an awful proxy for all the experiences that somebody has gone through. I'm working on a product right now where every single applicant can immediately talk for 45 minutes to using artificial intelligence right out of the gate. You want to go ahead and you want to be a machinist. There's no application, phone number, email, name, jump in and tell us a whole bunch of things, because 45 minutes of dialogue is 12 to 15 pages of text.
Incredible.
And if I get not hiring managers, but if I get frontline supervisors, other mechanics, people who have been there a long time to talk about the importance of the role, and you get 7 or 8 people to do that, because the mechanic job isn't going to change that much over a year. And so, okay, now I've got 100 pages of text against 12 pages of text. You want to talk about training data? Great. Let's increase the amount of right? Not use proxied. I think this is approximate. I find it to be unfortunate that we haven't realized the opportunities of AI and put down our historical use.
Yes.
That was always proxied.
Break the workflow, develop a new one. At the end of the day, I can only do 10 of these phone calls with a candidate at my best. I've done 15. I'm not my best listener and documenter and process organizer at 15 recruiter phone screens a day, but I can hustle and do 10 really good ones. Why wouldn't we open that up by a magnitude of 100 for the requisition I'm working, so that, wow, you know what? Instead of 20 recruiter screens, we've got data and we can manage a process for 200, 2,000 applicants. I think AI in this use case you just outlined for the first time gives us an insight into what the job actually looks like from the people doing it, not in a document. And then we also give more people an opportunity to interview and showcase their skills outside of the traditional presentation of a 2-page resume.
Exactly right. And I think, I've had people say, well, Andrew, how are you going to go ahead and do grading on this? I'm like, time out. Okay. This is not English class. This is not calculus. Okay. So the 90% A is wrong. What you want to understand is resident skills versus the ability to teach and upgrade skills, because that's where earnings live. I can hire Andrew or I can hire Brandon. Brandon may have all the resident skills that I need right now. And maybe Brandon will cost a little bit more. Maybe there's a little bit of a risk because he has desirable skills. But okay, and maybe there's a $40,000 difference in more money. But instead, I've identified that there's probably programs, learning, access to certifications, whatever, that I could apply to Andrew and say, Andrew, we're going to bring you in at this number. We're going to give you training over the next 6 to 12 months and put you on a path to be promoted or enlightened or whatever it is. And I guess the question is, well, why would you do that? For the $40,000. Okay. You want to, that's what you want. You want to, we've had this, how do I get a seat at the table forever? Okay. Well, the same way finance does. Yep. Earnings, profit, risk. That's what we need. We need people to say, Andrew could do this if. Well, how much is the if? And sometimes you need resident skills. I'm sorry, you do not want to hire an ER doctor and hope they figure it out over the next 6 months. Okay, there are jobs that you have to be able to do it, but there are some, like in recruiting, it's like, okay, maybe you don't know how to do tech recruitment right now, but we'll get you some exposure to people and you'll stumble a little bit. We'll make your we'll take your operational metrics, make them a little lower, make them a little looser, but we'll dedicate more time and effort to you. And all right, you want to be a talent advisor. That's what you're doing.
That is so true. And we often have this inflated sense of impact through our work. And recruiters are guilty of it for the recs they work. Hiring managers are guilty of it for the positions they hire, where it's this like tier one priority. There are probably like tier one priority roles that we fill. Engineer 1 through 5, go ahead and hire the folks that have done it before in a company that is a similar market. They've got candidate market fit. You're going to give them a basis point package equity deal. You're going to give them 75th percentile comp. There's a time and place for that. The reality is, give people an opportunity to be motivated. I don't think we index enough on human motivation in the hiring process. We talk about recruiting being an art and a science. Well, how do you measure the science of motivation? It's damn near impossible. If you've ever talked to a human being, you'll know that. So that's why we remove motivation from the process to replace it with this idea of how we can create some sort of algorithm or formula to hiring so that it makes us sound smart and gives us like a competitive edge or advantage to work with us as recruiters or to get our next recruiting job. The reality is, give people respect, give them a great candidate experience, measure more on motivation in the hiring process, and give people the opportunity to grow into a role with the skills they've already developed. So yes, hire for skills, hire for potential, thread the needle, and that's where you capture lightning in a bottle, which is what every company is going to have to do in the AI years. Every company is a tech company now.
Yeah, my first day in recruitment was the day after 9/11. And I was in executive recruitment and did well doing, got to almost be $1 million biller very, very quickly. And then I started running teams and people would say, how do you recruit? What do we need to do? And I say, you always have to look for the KEMA. I'm like, okay, what is that? Qualified, interested, motivated, and affordable.
Like
and
that.
If you can't tell me in a page, just single space, Arial 10 point, why someone's qualified, interested, motivated, and affordable, then I would really hesitate in presenting that to a manager or a decision maker. And you need to ask the question, why do you want the job? Or what can we offer to you that would not only have you come on board, but make it easy for you to stay. Just make it easy for you to stay, whatever it is. And there's all kinds of methodologies: retention incentives, cash, stock options, different benefits, whatever. I can't name them all. I can tell you, for me, I was really motivated by joining the federal government around benefits and around mission.
Yeah.
That was it. I wanted to impact 330 million people. That was it. And it was less money. And I didn't want to necessarily be a manager. I wanted to protect the nation.
Hell yeah.
Okay. I made that very clear during my recruitment process. And they're like, we got something for you here.
Awesome. I got chills. That's such a great tactical takeaway, Andrew. Thank you. I've thought about it too as a DWD. Have they done the job? Do they want to do the job? Can they do the job? But I love your acronym. We'll make sure that's in the notes and all over everything that we put through for content for this. This has been such an enlightening conversation, Andrew. I'm so grateful for your time, your interest, your generosity towards me and to other folks like me who are curious and hungry. You speak with so much passion. I'm on a mission to meet the most passionate people in my life, and you are certainly one of them. So thank you.
That's very kind, and I appreciate that. And recruitment, talent acquisition, onboarding, human resources, people who hire, people who develop, we've all got that opportunity to help each other and be generous. And I just want, and I know you've got a lot of listeners, every single person who's listening to this and the people who are to the right and left of you and you work with every day, thank you. You're helping people do what needs to get done to fulfill themselves and help their families and put our economy to work. And people who say this, I don't like recruiters or I hate recruiting, pound sand. It's an important job, and you're important.